Another day, another 500 questions about nutrition. Newsflash, everybody, Coach Teal is not a nutritionist or a registered dietitian, okay? Coach Teal is a physical fitness expert, but because I'm in fitness, people expect me to know everything under the sun about nutrition when the truth is nutrition is an entire subject matter of its own. Now, I'm not gonna sit up here and act like I know everything, but what I can do is give you all my perspective on nutrition and how it applies to fueling a physically active lifestyle. What's up, team? You are now listening to Sweatin Out My Edges, the #1 podcast for learning how to build an active lifestyle. My name is Coach Teal, and I will be your coach in this audible fitness journey. When I set out on my fitness journey, everything was about exercise. Exercise was the priority. Getting my steps in, lifting 45 times a week, making sure that I hit a certain time when I went on my runs, even though I was hardly ever training for a race. But as I got further along in my fitness journey, I started to realize what I ate had more of an impact on the quality of my workouts. And to be honest, once I hit a certain age, youth was no longer on my side. I couldn't just eat anything and expect my body to go with it. Looking back, the most valuable thing I learned thus far is that fitness as well as nutrition evolve over time. And it's important to have enough self-awareness to know when it's time to make an adjustment. Even if when a lot of the time I didn't know how. I think where I continue to find success is in being open-minded about learning how my body is changing and what my body needs to continue to grow. And today I want to focus on nutrition specifically. Now, like I said, I am neither a nutritionist nor a dietitian, but I do have a perspective that I hope you can learn from and maybe apply it to your own approach. So today we're going to cover some of the most common nutrition questions, but I'm also going to take the spotlight off some of those, quote unquote hot topics, because I do believe there are more important things to consider. And I want to start from a very common topic, which is knowing what to meal prep. I have a love-hate relationship with meal prep. The idea of meal prep makes sense, like make food ahead of time in order to save time later. I get that, but do I want to eat chicken breasts, rice, and broccoli for every day for 5 days straight? Absolutely not. No shade to the people who do. I love that for you. If that's what you want to do, I did it. And there are so many good reasons to do it. I think I find it the most useful if I'm in a training period where I'm tracking my calories very closely. I don't feel like I want to figure out my macros day after day. The predictability, of meal prep can be very useful, but I found that if I'm not in that type of training period, it became really boring to me. And at a certain point, I wasn't enjoying it. Meal prep was kind of taking the joy out of nourishment. And so I had to evaluate what nourishment meant to me, because the truth is I like cooking. Cooking was not just nourishment for my body. The practice was also nourishment for my spirit. And at the same time, I actually hate leftovers. There are very few foods that taste good the next day. So it started not to make sense to make these huge batches of food all the time when I was happy making fresh food daily or just every couple of days. The other thing that I've learned is that there is a lot of nutritional value eating foods that are in season. Oh my God, y'all. Food tastes so much better when you eat it in season. And so when I consider what I'm preparing to eat, I take two things into consideration. What is my current fitness goal and what foods are currently in season? If I'm lifting heavy, like heavy, I'm going to prioritize high quality protein, and I'm going to be intentional about it. For example, I would say that I don't eat red meat as much as the next guy, but if I am eating red meat, it's likely during a time I'm trying to maintain some muscle gains, most likely in the winter. And when I'm looking at what vegetables are in season, again, the joy in that is you're not eating the same thing every day, and it tastes so much fresher, especially if you get it from like the farmer's market. So that's my views on meal prep. I like it in season and for a reason. I'm not eating a certain type of food just to be eating it. Food needs an objective and it needs to taste good. And the goal is to build a relationship with food that can last a lifetime. If you like cooking daily, then cook. But if you need the convenience of meal prep, do that. I would say just make sure whatever you do, it makes sense for you. Now, of course, when making decisions on meal prep, one of the most asked questions I get is how much protein should I be eating? And truthfully, it depends on your fitness goal. If your goal is to build muscle and your workout program reflects that, the NSCA recommendation for daily protein intake is 1.4 to 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. And that's to support muscle maintenance, muscle growth, muscle repair. And during intense training periods or weight loss, that recommendation can increase to 1.6 to 2.2 kilograms of body weight. And the FDA parallels that recommendation, citing 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight per day for the active individual. And of course, these protein sources should be diverse: meat, beans, legumes, vegetables, nuts, seeds. Notice how I didn't say protein shakes because that's processed food, and we'll get into a little bit more of that later, but I don't actually think people are lacking in awareness about protein in general. I think that's great that people are learning about the importance of protein in their diet, but I think a less emphasized nutrient that we could all use a little more of is fiber, okay? We are not talking enough about fiber. Fiber is that girl. And especially if you're eating a significant amount of protein on a daily basis, fiber should be high on your priority list for your nutritional priorities, because fiber is going to be the magic that makes sure that protein is moving right along in your digestive tract. It's gonna be the thing that keeps you from overeating, and it's gonna be your secret weapon for maintaining a healthy weight. So where do we get our fiber? It's mostly gonna be found in a lot of beans, nuts, legumes, seeds. As a matter of fact, can also provide a good protein source. Hemp seeds, for example, I always encourage others to explore their benefits because they are one of the few vegan whole foods that are a source of complete protein. Now, you may be thinking, what is a complete protein? So protein is actually made up of molecules called amino acids. There are 20 amino acids that your body needs to support itself. And these amino acids are categorized as non-essential and essential. Non-essential amino acids are amino acids that our body can produce on its own. Essential amino acids, on the other hand, our body can't produce on its own, and therefore we have to obtain them through our diet. So when we say a particular food is a complete protein, it means that it naturally contains all the essential amino acids our body needs. And it's not just hemp seeds. I just highlighted them because, you know, I feel like they're lesser known. And as someone who diet is mostly dairy free, I tend to stay away from whey protein and opt for vegan protein sources if I go to grab a protein shake, which I think is a great segue to our next talking point, which is whole foods. Okay, so I've been prioritizing whole food diet, I would say probably within the last 6 months. My goal with that is to just get away from ultra processed or even just processed foods in general. Recently, I've been seeing the value in getting rid of the unnecessary, unhealthy parts of my diet. I think being on a health and fitness journey, it's important to again recognize that the journey is evolving. And I'm at a place where I feel like I need to know what's in my food, and I can see and feel the difference in eating real foods versus processed foods. The type of energy it leaves me with after eating. And I'm not gonna lie, bacon, beef jerky, even candy is not where it's at. I wanna feel nourished after I eat, not sluggish, tired. And when I look at how many health risks come from eating ultra processed food and consider that alongside all the work I'm doing in the gym, I definitely don't want to be working against myself. I saw this post on social media of this girl running, and it was like, POV, maturing is realizing you don't need energy gels when you can just eat candy. And I was just thinking to myself, like, girl, maturing is realizing energy gels and candy are both inferior options, okay? Give me dried fruit, give me a date. But again, it's a journey. I didn't come to that realization overnight. I literally used to eat a bag of peanut M&Ms before going to track practice, like on a regular basis. I just think about my younger self, like, girl, be freaking for real. But if someone asked me for my best advice when it comes to nutrition, I would say 100% without a doubt, start making strides to move toward a whole food diet. It's the best diet you can do for your body and for your longevity. Doesn't mean that you can't enjoy, a piece of candy or a pastry every now and then, but I think we all, myself included, can be guilty of overindulging, and that's where we get in trouble. So let's take a little bit of a pivot. I want to bring fitness back into the focus and talk about calories and caloric deficits. Now, when people ask me how many calories should they be eating, to be in a caloric deficit, the answer is easy, because the answer is I don't know. I have no idea how many calories you should be eating because, one, I don't know your goal. Do you even have a goal? And two, a deficit depends entirely on your energy expenditure. You can only be in a deficit if you're burning more calories than you're eating. And if you don't have, let's say, a fitness tracker that you wear daily, it can be difficult to estimate how many calories you burn on a day-to-day basis. I'm not saying fitness trackers are entirely accurate, but they certainly can be helpful in hitting that target calorie intake. And a lot of times people don't even know how to spread their calories. Like, there are people out there who still think carbs are bad. Carbs are not bad. Alcohol is bad. Extreme diets are bad. Carbs are not bad. Your body needs carbs. Your brain especially truly prefers to run on carbs. Now, if we're talking about the type of carbs and considering what is beneficial and what's not as beneficial, then we can have a conversation. I don't want anyone leaving this podcast saying, oh my God, Coach Till said carbs aren't bad. I'm gonna eat a donut. Absolutely not. I did not tell you to eat a donut. Okay, simple sugars, ultra processed foods are bad. And I hate saying bad because it's not a terrible thing. I just think overindulging is where the trouble lies. And a lot of us have done too much, but I'm losing the plot. We're supposed to be talking about a deficit. If you want to be in a caloric deficit, my advice is to figure out how many calories you're burning on a daily basis, because chances are, if you're on a fitness journey, you have some type of fitness tracker. And once you figure out how many calories you're burning, make it your business to eat less calories than that. And you may say, but Coach Till, how do I know how many calories I'm eating? You gotta track it, baby. Okay, it's 2026. There are 10,000 apps that can help you understand how many calories are in your food. And at the very least, I would say a good place to start is just reading the nutrition facts label. You'd be surprised at how many calories are in a serving of a given food. But yes, use an app, write it down, or just start to make yourself aware about how many calories you are consuming on a day-to-day basis. Figure out how many calories are typical for you to burn in a day. And then once you obtain that information, then make it your business to find an app that works for you and start tracking. Once you get in the habit of tracking, then you can find your deficit. But the key is to do everything in stages. Build a habit and then build on top of that habit and then maintain the discipline, because it'll be that much easier. And then eventually you won't need to track anything. That's the goal, right? Okay, so this is the last subject I want to touch on, and it's ingredients. Earlier, I mentioned that the best diet is the whole food diet, but even I didn't just magically wake up one day and start eating whole foods for every meal. Sometimes packaged foods are convenient, but if I'm going to eat packaged food, it's going to be high quality, which means few ingredients. I am in a season of, if a food has ingredients in it that I can't pronounce, get it away from me. Okay, I don't want it. And I'm also in a season of learning how to make things at home. I remember back in 2023, I started having the worst acne, worse than I had when I was a teenager. And I was so confused as to why this acne was just seemingly coming out of nowhere. And I'll never forget, I was at this conference and I was talking to a mentor of mine who is a functional medicine specialist and a registered dietitian. And she was telling me how some people are allergic to dairy and it won't show up in a typical way like hives or anything like that, but it can show up in skin inflammation like acne or even eczema. And I was telling her about this acne and she was like, take dairy out of your diet completely. And I don't eat a lot of dairy to begin with, but at the same time, I was eating it pretty consistently. I would have like milk in my tea or shredded cheese or Greek yogurt. And the funny thing was the acne was only on my cheeks, not on my chin, not on my forehead, nowhere else. So she said, try giving up dairy. And I lied to you not, 3 months, no butter, no cheese, no milk, no yogurt. My acne was completely gone. I could not believe it. And I'm sharing this story for a few reasons. One, there are some things that may seem healthy, that may be categorized as healthy and that work for other people, but they just might not work for you. You know how convenient it was for me to grab a non-fat Greek yogurt and just get so much protein out of that? But even if there's this great protein for my muscles, it wasn't really great for my skin. And at the time, I didn't like that trade-off. And so I had to give it up. Giving up dairy forced me to find alternative options. I brought up hemp milk earlier, but I learned how to make hemp milk, almond milk at home, which ultimately became even more of a benefit because I was able to make it, from scratch using real whole food ingredients. And again, knowing what's in your food is top tier nutrition. And finally, when I became more aware of how my body processed dairy, it encouraged me to start paying attention to how other foods impact my body. The best thing you can do for your nutrition is learn how foods affect you. When you eat certain foods, you should be surveying, does it make you bloated? Does it give you energy? And side story, the first time I had coffee, it's another side story. First time I really drank coffee was in grad school. I used to never drink caffeine because I always thought it would make me super jittery. When I was working in grad school, I was working hard. I was always on the go and I needed energy. And so I started having coffee in the morning, baby. When I tell you I'm a high responder, okay, I must have extra receptors in my body for caffeine because it gets me going. And I won't drink caffeine unless I want to be charged up, for lack of better words. But I was just reminded of this when I had pre-workout for the first time. I had pre-workout for the first time, didn't know it had caffeine in it. Never again. My ears were on fire, but that's another story for another day. Anyways, my point is, you got to take the time to learn yourself. It's important to learn how your body responds to different foods, and it's easier to do that when you know what's in the food. Okay, Fit Click, I hope today's episode gave you something to think about when you're building your own nutrition plan. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast and you want to join the Fit Click, hit subscribe and tune in for our next episode. Thank you for listening. This is Coach Teal signing off, saying I hope you can end your next workout saying, girl, that was worth sweating out my edges.